are the human experience, with our flaws, our passions, our triggers, our inspirations, and our imprints. If we could see behind everyone's story, then perhaps what we would have is deep compassion. In this podcast, I get the chance to explore these stories from some truly fascinating people in some honest and heartwarming conversations. And best of all, I get to share these discussions with you. I'm Lael Stone, and this is Humans Being. Welcome to Humans Being. I'm Lael Stone. It's a pleasure to have you with me today. My humanness for this week is actually all about presence and distraction. And when we're recording this, we've just come off the summer holidays where it's a lot of downtime and you're meant to be resting. And boy, have I wrestled with this, because I'm very good at doing. I am a very efficient human. I like creating things. I love to be thinking about what's next. And when I'm on that pause or that holiday break, I feel deeply uncomfortable because there's so much a strong part of me that loves to be in that movement and creating. So I set myself a bit of a mission to not open my computer, to try not to look at my phone, to sit on the balcony and just look at the trees, listen to the birds. But it is really hard and I get distracted often. It's so easy to pick up a phone and then I'm watching a funny dog video and all of a sudden I'm down some rabbit hole. And I'm so hyper aware of how important it is to have presence. And I find that I can be very, very present and very still and really locked in when I'm working with someone. The deep listening, the tuning into what their body's doing, how they're feeling, like that's not unfamiliar for me. But when I'm not having to focus on someone and it's just me, I'm still really surprised about how hard that is. So, I started painting. I do not painting, like paint by numbers. That's my painting because it gives me something to do and I read books. But I am trying harder to just be in the stillness. And the reason why I talk about this is because I think it's something in this day and age that we all often struggle with, that deep presence and stillness. And it really makes me think about being a kid where we didn't have all these distractions, where you would just sit in the car on road trips and you would just daydream and look out the window. We weren't listening to audiobooks or, we were not watching something on an iPad. We were not even reading because that made your car sick. Like you were literally just either fighting with your siblings or looking out the window. And those moments of daydreaming, those moments that we had as a child growing up, where there was all that space for imagination and contemplation, we just don't have a lot of that now. And I find that place of dreaming, where I often get it, is in the shower, which a lot of people talk about when you have a shower and all of a sudden you just start thinking about things and then, those places, kicking in your mind of, oh, I could do this and I could try that. And that's not great because you can't spend half an hour in the shower. But all the distractions that we have that stop us from that stillness and that presence and that daydreaming, I am so hyper aware of these days. And it's like I have to schedule in my daydreaming time or schedule in my present time, which feels jarring. But with all the noise that's going on out there, I can see how important it is. Yet it's something else I struggle with. So I'm wondering if you're listening to this, if you're nodding along going, oh, yep, that's me. That's me. And what you could do to create those spaces in your world where you can just be still, you can lean into that presence, you can listen within, because there is a lot of gold in there. All right. So this segue leads me to my next amazing guest who knows a lot about distraction and how easy it is for us to lose ourselves. She's a master of understanding humans, how they work, their habits. It is such a beautiful pleasure to introduce Amantha Imber to the podcast today. Welcome, lovely.
Oh, so good to be here with you.
I'm going to just read a little bit about Amantha if you don't know who she is. So Amantha is and let me just say firstly too, when I first met you, you came up and introduced me. We met at this event and you said, I'm Amantha. And I was like, oh, Samantha. And you're like, no, it's Samantha without the S. Yes. And as someone who also has a weird name, you spend your life kind of, explaining your name. So I feel you.
Yeah.
Amantha is an organisational psychologist. She is the founder of Inventium, which is all about behaviour change, and Inventium AI, which is AI capability building. She is the host of How I Work podcast, which has 6 million downloads, which is so massive. She interviews the world's most successful people on habits and productivity. And she's also just launched her new podcast, How I AI, which is awesome. We're going to talk about that. She was the first Australian to win Thinkers50 Innovation Award, which is like the Oscars for management thinking. That's a whole thing. That must have been pretty epic. And she's also the author of 4 best-selling books, including Time-Wise. Her new book, which is called The Energy Game, is coming out on July 7th this year. She's also a mum and a really fabulous human who I have felt very honoured to have crossed paths with. We've had some really amazing conversations. So to start off with, Amantha, like what I'm talking about in that introduction about my humanness, can you relate to that? Like how does that feel for you? Is that something that you struggle with as well?
Massively. I find it so hard to switch off.
Yeah.
As does my husband, which means that just in our household, it's really, really hard. I have to deliberately go, I'm not going to work this weekend. I'm not going to do anything work related.
Yeah.
My computer will stay in my home office.
Yeah.
And I often fail with that goal.
Yeah. And I think that that is pretty much standard for most people these days, isn't it? And I think also when you work for yourself as well, and when you are like a founder, when you've got all that going on, there is always that in the back of your mind. It's very different sometimes for people who have a job and then they just leave and then they go home. So I think there's those kind of messy pieces as well.
Yeah, I think that a lot of my kind of confusion in my head around what is a good boundary for me to set comes from the fact that I love my work. And so when people talk about hobbies and passions, well, I really like what I do and I get so much enjoyment and satisfaction and joy from my work. But then I know theoretically when I'm into work all the time, so then it gets really confusing. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I should just, force myself to read a fiction book because that is not work. There's no way connected to what I do, although I am a writer, so arguably maybe it is. But yeah, it's a constant debate in my head. What's the quote unquote right thing to do with downtime?
And what is the balance of that? Because I really relate to that. I have this conversation all the time with my husband. I'm just like, am I just in avoidance of being still? Or is it just the makeup of who I am that is often thinking about the next thing? That's a great idea. I could do that. Like I've always been like that. I've been an entrepreneur right from the very beginning. I love seeing new things, making it happen, all that kind of stuff. And he kind of said to me, he knows me better than anyone. He's like, that's just you. You're always probably going to be like that. But maybe the challenge is to make sure you just give those moments of recharge for yourself, but don't make it wrong that you still kind of love doing what you do and you want to work with that. But it's really hard, isn't it, to find the balance, I think. Yeah. I mean, if I was to go away, for 3 weeks and do nothing, I know that after like 7 or 8 days, I'm like, I'm recharged, I'm done, I'm good, I'm ready to go back. And, maybe I probably do need to do that to stretch me a bit more. But, I think it is about really kind of tuning into who you are as a human. And I guess my big concern is, am I doing it to hide from life, being busy? Because that's a big thing, isn't it? That people often, they escape from some of the bigger things they need to deal with by making themselves busy. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. If I see that a lot with how we have a relationship with our phones.
Yeah.
And I will try to every day have quite significant periods of time where my phone is not within arm's reach.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting question to ask yourself. How many minutes or maybe hours per day is your phone not within arm's reach? Because if it's within arm's reach, we're going to grab it. We're going to, maybe feel some discomfort with what we're doing. And so we crave that distraction, and our phone is our little distraction machine. And then we grab it, we get a fix, but we often get pulled into whatever generally social media app we've opened up on our phone. And we're just blocking out any kind of self-reflection that there might be the opportunity for, or any kind of daydreaming or any kind of stillness. And so I I personally think about that a lot. How many hours on this day was my phone out of reach? And if I'm going into one room, like my home office, I'll often deliberately leave my phone downstairs. So there's friction in the way. If I'm craving distraction, or if I'm like, oh, I wonder what notifications have popped up on my phone, it's like I have to actually walk down a flight of stairs, which seems like too much friction. So I just get back on with it.
You've just made me realize the other day I went downstairs to put some laundry on and I took my phone with me. And I remember actually having the thought, why am I taking my phone downstairs to put a load of washing on? But it was so automatic, and it was kind of like, well, I might miss something. And I'm like, but it'll still be there. And I'm like, that's wild, isn't it? That's become kind of our norm.
I think we're afraid of boredom.
Yes, I think there's that. I've really tried hard, actually, like every night after dinner, and we live in a really beautiful place in the world. My husband and I we always say, let's go for a postprandial walk, which is, it's a term meaning you go for a walk after you've eaten, right? Which is a very good thing to do. So we go for our postprandial stroll with the dog. And I really made a note of not taking my phone with me, to just be like, don't even take it with you. Like, if something happens, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And the kids can wait, they don't even need to contact me. But even that, I have had to really consciously go, stop. It's a really big thing, isn't it? I mean, and I do wonder about this generation of children that are growing up with it, because we still were in the generation where we didn't have phones, we had to be bored, all that kind of stuff. And now that is the norm, it's very interesting, isn't it, as to where we're sitting, as humans. So I would love to start by talking about in 2024, you shared that was your year of burnout, right? Where you had burnt out after launching your book, The Health Habit, which you kind of wrote and shared. The irony isn't lost on you, the productivity expert who couldn't sustain her own energy. So tell me a bit more about that. What was that all about?
2024 was a really hard year at work. So I run a company called Inventium. We do a lot of behavior change training, all over the world with, quite large companies like Google, Apple, Lego, all sorts of big brands. And and we'd had all these changes at work, a lot of people changes. It was a tough economic environment to be running a business in 2024. And it was kind of the perfect storm of a lot of change, a lot of stress. And I remember this moment in the middle of the year. It would have been in June, and one of my friends that I catch up with every few weeks, we will generally walk. So we'll meet up for a walk every few weeks. She happens to be a clinical psychologist, and I was telling her this really weird kind of thought/fantasy that I just had circulating in my head at that time. And I said to her, I've got this thing, this fantasy that I'm craving, and I think I'm just going a little bit mad. And I use that term colloquially because I'm also a psychologist. I said, I'm kind of wishing that I got quite sick or injured in some way, but not terminally, just enough that they'd take me to hospital and I'd have to stay in hospital for a week and no one could contact me. I'd have no Wi-Fi. No one from work could get in touch with me. I also couldn't work. And then after a week of just being completely out of contact with everyone, I would emerge back into the world, refreshed, recovered, and on I would go. And I said to my mate Sabina, I said, sound crazy? And she said, no, I have heard this so much in my private practice. She said, I call it the getting hit by a bus fantasy, where I've heard so many people who are burnt out or burning out describe that scenario to me. And at first I thought, oh, thank goodness I'm not alone. But then I thought, but here I am wishing I was in hospital. And that feels like quite a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I love Sabina. I know who you talked about. She's awesome. I saw her just the other day. I'm laughing when you say that story, not laughing at you, but I used to daydream about that when I had young kids. I just want to go to hospital for a week. I don't want a serious illness. I don't want to be on a drip, but I want to just be able to have food brought to me and read magazines and rest. And when I do talks, particularly to educators and parents, and mainly women, and I often ask them the question, put your hand up here if you've ever fantasized about going to hospital for a week for a break. Nearly 90% of the women put their hand up, and they all laugh and they all look at each other, and I go, what does this tell you about the problem that we have for women, particularly around self-care, around boundaries, around where we're at? So your fantasy, I think, is not not abnormal at all. And I remembered, like, again, when my kids were little, just when I was in the thick, and I wasn't even running, I had a business on the side, but just the hustle of 3 kids and not really taking care of myself, that was my go-to. I remember I think my kids were all little still, and I got shingles, and it was painful, but it wasn't bad. But my mum was like, oh God, shingles is so bad. And she just all of a sudden dropped everything and just came over and made food and kind of looked after me. And I remember going, yeah, it's really bad. Because there was part of me like, oh, I have a reason actually to stay in bed and be taken care of. And I feel sad for that mum in me at that time. But it also is it's a red flag, isn't it? That we're not doing great if that's what happened.
Yeah.
So what happened after that then? Once you realize that that's my fantasy and wow, there's something probably going on here. What happened after that?
So what happened after that is that I had 2 weeks of annual leave, which had been scheduled, like, I don't think I actually did that in reaction to being burnout. It was just simply in the diary and airfares were booked. So off I went on leave. I'd also, at the time, I had stepped into an interim CEO role in my business. I'd recruited someone to take over that role, which didn't go particularly well. But at that point, I'd handed over the baton and I went on leave, and I thought, cool. I'll come back refreshed, recovered, and not burnt out. And, I was pretty relaxed after I had come back from holidays, but within a couple of weeks, I was back to where I was, wanting to, just be in hospital. And what I learned, and look, it was that experience that really inspired me to write The Energy Game, because I was looking around and I'm talking to clients every week, and I was just hearing that so many people were either burnt out or just chronically depleted, where it was their normal to just wake up feeling tired every day, and that for that tiredness to not go away. And I think what's really hard when you're in that state is that we kind of know, look, probably something big needs to change. And I knew that at my work. There were decisions that I was not making out of fear. And I ended up making those decisions, and they were quite big, important, and I felt brave decisions because I'd simply been too scared to make them in the state that I was in. But what I wanted to find, and being like a science nerd, I just turned to the research. I'm like, what are just small things that I can do to gradually grab back that energy so I do have the energy to make those bigger decisions? And that was really how The Energy Game was born, and how I came back in, 2025, I was full of energy, and I felt like I'd done a 180, and also the culture of the business did a 180, perhaps not surprisingly, because of where I got to.
Yeah, totally. And what were the biggest things that you were like, once you implemented them, or you're like, I got this, what shifted? What were the big things that moved the needle for you?
So in terms of the 3 types of things, like when I think about change in my own life, I see myself as a scientist, and I'm just running experiments, and it just takes the pressure off. It's like anyone can run a 1-week experiment to go, does doing this particular short intervention, for example, going for a 10-minute walk around the block without my phone, what impact does this have? Like, how am I feeling at the end of each day? How's that changing? How am I feeling at the end of the week? And so, it's really low expectations on myself. But I think, I can do anything for a week. I can try anything for a week. And I can certainly try an intervention, if you like, that takes me 5 minutes. So I can commit to that. And so I ran a series of experiments. And what I found through the research is that there were really 3 types of experiments that I was running, or 3, mini challenges that I do every day. So the first type that I found in the research is what I call boosts, where there are certain things that if we do them, they will give us an instant energy uplift. a couple of examples. So one is that I think there's so many people talking about ice baths and cold water immersion and hot and cold therapy. And for me, there's no way I would get into a bath full of ice. That just seems like insanity to me, and absolutely no way. But when I dug into the research, I found that, well, if you just add 30 seconds of cold water to the end of your shower, that will have quite similar benefits. And so just in the morning, I slowly built up 5 seconds by 5 seconds because I don't like cold water. And it's like if you just, turn on the cold water for the last little bit of your shower, it's been scientifically shown to have a very immediate but also lasting impact on your energy levels. Likewise, just having cold water or some ice or something on your face just for a couple of minutes. Again, it also does the trick. So there were certain boosts, if you like, that I could go, okay, I'm really lagging and I need to perform for this meeting or this presentation, so I'm going to do a boost. The second thing that I found was looking at rest. And I think that most people, when they think about rest, they go, well, I binge watch Netflix every night, so that's my rest. But I would call that fake rest because that is not rejuvenating. That is just you going, I've got no more brain cells that are functioning right now, so I'm just going to look at Netflix while also scrolling on my phone. And that is not recharging anyone. And so I dug deep into research and I'm like, well, how do we actually do real rest? And certainly, just giving yourself a break from stimulus, like going on, what I call a silent walk, where you're not taking anything that could input into your brain, like, a podcast, although obviously, listen to this podcast while you're walking. Of course. But don't be scrolling when you walk. Don't be, having things go into your brain. Just walk, just be in your environment. And that is much more recharging than a couple of hours of Netflix. And then the final category of experiments and challenges that I ran were around what I call protect strategies. And this is really about protecting your energy. Like if you imagine your energy is this bucket and there's holes in it and it's constantly leaking out all the day, it's like protect strategies are kind of filling the holes in that bucket and, thinking about, well, how can you say no more often? Like one of my favorite things to do is a strategy called yes, but. So if someone asks you for something and, I feel like, we're similar in that we're both generous and we want to help, it feels really hard to say no. But if you say yes, but with these constraints, essentially, we're still able to be generous, but with those boundaries that the but is putting around things. So there's some of the things that I tried.
I love them. They're really simple, beautiful things that we can actually do. Yeah, there's two places I want to go with this. One is really around the why we find it so hard to shift and change our habits, right? Because I know that's a big thing that you talk about. And I often find this in my work. We are so much more comfortable sitting in what we know, even if it doesn't serve us, than we are taking a step towards the unknown. Like what have you discovered over all your beautiful years of research and work in this field? What is it that keeps people stuck in that?
Yeah. Well, I think change is really hard. And one of the things when I was writing and researching the health habit, which is all around, how can we sleep, move and eat better, but importantly, how do we make new habits stick? Because I think people really struggle with that. I think, we all know that, like what good sleep hygiene looks like. We know that we're not meant to check our phone before we go to bed. That there's all that sort of stuff I feel like is pretty well known. Yet there's still so many people that are not getting a good night's sleep. And I just was quite curious. It's like, there's so much knowledge out there about how can we be healthy and how can we have good habits. There's new books about, how to eat better, how to move better and so forth released every single day. But people are still not exercising. People are still making, perhaps less wise choices with what they're putting into their mouth and, they're making poor choices around their sleep. But what it comes down to is understanding, like, what is the major barrier for you, because there's not a one-size-fits-all approach getting in the way of making a change. And there are 4 things that generally are getting in the way, and one is generally more prevalent than the other. So the first thing that people struggle with are motivational barriers, where you feel like you have to do the thing rather than want to do the thing. Like, my doctor said I have to exercise an hour every day, but you don't really want to. So motivation can be a big thing. Secondly, there can be social or relational barriers in the way. Like if, for example, you're trying to eat more healthy, but the social norms in your household, in your family, or in your, workplace or friendship group, so that, well, we always just get Maccas for lunch. That's just normal. Like relational barriers are going to get in the way. The third thing are environmental barriers. So this is the physical and digital environment that you live and work in. So for example, let's just say you're trying to quit sugar, but if you've got, chocolate and biscuits at eye level in transparent containers in your pantry, your environment is not helping you make that change. And then finally, cognitive barriers. So if we're just feeling exhausted, stressed, burnt out, it's so much harder to change our behavior. And so really it's about thinking, well, which barrier is the mostly getting in the way for me? And then there are strategies that, that we can then use to overcome that specific barrier.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it's breaking it down, isn't it, to the small little steps. But it's also what I hear and what you're saying is about it's knowing yourself and how you turn up in the world. So when you were talking all about the boosts and those kind of things, it really made me think about only really in the last few years have I really begun to understand what I need to recharge me. So, I can be out on a stage talking, I can have these conversations. If I'm working, I can be really personable, but actually my default is quiet. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. I actually just need to be like this at home. And, we know those kind of things of the introvert, outrovert kind of stuff and the different combinations we have. And I think what I'm really getting from what you're saying is it's about knowing yourself well enough to go, what is it that actually sustains me? Like I have really learned that I need quiet. Like I need no noise. And I live in a house with 3 adult children and a husband who all love music. Like music's their life. And so they'll always be like, who's your favorite song, Mum? Or do you know who this is? I'm like, nah, what? I mean, I appreciate music, but it's not an accompaniment to my life. And even if I'm driving in the car, I'll usually have it be quiet because it feels too much for me. Like I actually need the quiet. And I also am the same. If I have to be on, I will be really on, deeply engaged, open. But even when we take the dog for a walk, my husband and I laugh all the time. He walks along and he's like, yay, say hi to everyone. No, I have a hat on, glasses. I've got this energy field around me that says, don't fucking look at me. I am like, don't. And even like we have this running joke, my husband and I, we can stand in a line waiting for something and I guarantee he'll turn around and start up a conversation with the person next to us. And I'm just like, don't. I'm being friendly. It's community. It's actually a beautiful thing. But in my world, I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone. And if I'm on, I'm on. But if I'm not, I really need to be quiet. And I've learned to just go, that's who I am. And I know a lot of people who kind of feel similar in that way of just like, you have to balance. That's what helps you recharge. And I think I know now that I can recharge well if I have quiet and nobody's asking anything of me. And that could just be half a day and then I'm good again. But it's really, I think it's about figuring out what works for you, isn't it? And I love those tips of like, what are the things that get in the way of that?
Yeah, I so relate to you. I've got, I guess, a threshold for noise and people, and I feel like it's a lower threshold than a lot of other people. And it's, it's like I'm in my late 40s now, and it's like it's taken me a very long time to really not just understand that, but be okay with that. Because I feel like, I was certainly brought up to think, oh, well, we should always be socializing. We should always be, having, social occasions or, people over. And I feel like I know what my limit is.
Yeah.
And if I push past that, I'll be really exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really good to know, isn't it? And we're all different. Like, I'm the type of person, I'll go to a party and I'll be there for 3 hours and then I'm gone. Like, I'm never staying till the end. That's just not me. Like, it's kind of a known thing with some of my friends now. It's like, we're like, oh, she's gone. Because I'm not a stay to the end kind of person. And I love it that certain people that are, but I'm just like, no, I've done it. Amazing. Great. I have to go now and be quiet and don't talk to me. Like, it's a beautiful thing, I think, to know that. But also, I think, what you touched on then is about what we're often imprinted with, all those indoctrinations of how it should look, and to be social and to do this and to do the right thing and all that kind of stuff. They're hard to shake off when they've been very loud in your head for a long time. I'm wondering too, like in, just being the founder of your company and the work and then the burnout and all that kind of stuff, was there a strong thread for you, that kind of imprint for you around working hard, keeping going, all that kind of stuff? Has that been something that you've been very aware of?
Very aware of, yeah. And look, I had a really lovely upbringing. I think I'm really lucky, but I'm definitely aware that, that I felt that, the better I did at school, and particularly academically, we're not a sporty family, and so I feel like my parents didn't really care, how I went in, sporting things, which were few and far between. I got very, I guess addicted to the praise that would come from getting good grades. And it's such an objective thing when you get your report card. It's like, straight A pluses. And if I got an A, I'd be quite upset. And sometimes,
sorry, if you got an A, you'd be upset.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't an A plus.
Because it wasn't an A plus. Yep. And I feel like sometimes, so, and I feel like, maybe there was disappointment that I was picking up as well. My parents are both really high achievers, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I liked the praise that came with high grades. And I think that has absolutely carried through in terms of being very, very ambitious, first as a young woman, and now, I guess as someone in the middle years. I've been very driven by that. Yeah.
And how is it still there for you?
It is. I'm just trying to think if it's dissipated. I think what has changed is that I'm really aware of it, and I will question it, and I'll be like, who am I doing this for? Which then forces me to go, okay, well, it's a cliche, but what's my why? And ultimately, I'm really driven by impact and the impact that I can have on people. And whatever I'm doing, whether it's writing a book, and, as you would know, like, writing a book is such a big time commitment that you better have a bloody good why. And it's hopefully not, I want to sell lots of books and, have like any kind of external acclaim that is stuff that you cannot control. And I've definitely learned that lesson. And I don't know, it's still there though. It's still there. And yeah, it's still there.
It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because that internal story of I need to achieve to be enough or to be successful drives a lot of people, whether it's academically, in business, making money, sports people, singers, performers. Like, there is often a big drive that sits with many people of, I will be loved if this happens. I had the beautiful opportunity to talk to Libby Trickett, and he was a mum of 5 kids under 10. I'm just like, that has got to be harder than winning a gold medal. And we had this beautiful conversation about what drove her to work so hard. When she achieved that, did it give her what she wanted, which she kind of shared? Not really. It was like a relief kind of story in her that says, well, maybe now I'm enough, right? Because I've achieved that. But it actually wasn't, it didn't give her what she thought it would mean. And we see that a lot with people who are really, really successful. And on some level, it's amazing because of what they do, the magic they create, the things that they put out into the world. It's a gift to the world. But it is a really tricky dance, isn't it, between what fuels you to do it. Are you still searching for something in it, or are you doing it from that pure motivation of why? Because this feels really good and this is something I want to do. And I've often asked myself that question, am I doing this or trying to do all these things in the world for approval? It doesn't feel like a massive pull for me. I kind of keep coming back to, I'm doing this because I want to be of service to others. Like I can see the power of helping people, and that's what feels really beautiful about it. But it's definitely something that I've heard from many, many people that sits in their mind as the push forward. Yeah, and I wonder, there's a lot of beauty and positivity around that sometimes, but then also, does it ever reach a point where we go, I can put that down now. I don't need that anymore. It's not actually about that. It's a really interesting space, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I find it so hard to imagine not working because work just gives you such tangible signals and metrics of, am I enough if I'm really achievement oriented? And, I think, how will I get that need fed if I'm not working? Because you certainly don't get it fed by parenting.
Yep.
You don't get, like, it's not like there's metrics attached to your marriage or friendships. So I do wonder that, and I'm also really like hyper cognizant of it for my daughter.
Yeah.
And she's like just gone into high school this year, and I like whenever, certainly in the primary school years when she'd get her, I don't know, what are they called? Report cards? I don't think they're called, I don't know, her scores.
Development tools, is that whatever they're called these days?
Yeah. I, and she's like, she's, she like, if she's not getting, and she's not like a straight A, student in primary school, and part of me recognizes that makes me really uncomfortable because, I guess the message that you take is it's like, oh, am I safe if I'm not getting that?
Yeah.
And it's like, of course I was. I was brought up in a very loving, non-abusive household, but, I just have to really fight against my instinct to just go, let's look at where you've come from.
Yeah.
Let's look at how you trying really hard and you being really resilient has changed where you were a year ago and where you were now. And it doesn't matter what that final number is, but what matters is that you're trying really hard, and you can see how that is, like, improving you and how you're improving, and you can feel really proud about that. But Matt, none of that comes naturally to me.
It's really hard. Thank you for being so honest about that, because I think my measure of that, like academics is not a thing in our house. It's emotional intelligence. So if one of my kids is not like doing, I'm like, I raised you better than that. That's my metric of it. If they're not meeting something with reflection, awareness, I'm like, like, isn't it funny? And like, yeah, in some other families, it would be about sport. It would be about performing. And it's so interesting, isn't it, that parent place we sit in, because we love our children and we, the goal is to deeply accept who they are, all of them, they're just human and they're enough the way they are. Yet these patterns and stories that have fueled us, they seep out the side, and you have to be really conscious of them, don't you?
Yeah.
Because we then unconsciously just put that pressure on their shoulders, and then that's what travels forward.
Yeah.
And it's a big thing to break. It's a big pattern to stop and break, and to be like, actually, it's not about that. I think I can't remember who it was I was talking to about something like this, and I remember having this thought of, is the goal to actually be deeply comfortable with being ordinary? And I know that sounds big, right? But a meaning in are we all looking for this specialness to know that we're enough? Are we this enough? Are we that enough? Have we achieved enough? Those kind of things. Is that creating the safety within? And is the mission to actually just be ordinary and be really content and happy within that? And I wonder for people that are very driven or that have that fire, that feels jarring. Like, I can get that because I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I could just be that. I mean, and again, ordinary is whatever is that. It's different for people, for lots of different people. But maybe that is when you come home to yourself and you go, actually, none of that matters. What I look like, what I earn, how much I'm achieving, how many downloads I have, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm just doing this because it's joyous. I'm doing it because it lights me up and doing it because it's of service to others. And I think I really learned quite a bit of that about my book that I launched last year because, you have the expectations that people are going to like it. And I remember once it was launched, I had this feeling of, and whatever happens now, it doesn't matter because I've done the hard thing. The hard thing was actually writing it. The hard thing was wrestling with myself within it. The hard thing was all the bits that came up about it. It actually doesn't matter how it goes because it was a gift for me, I mean, and there's a part of me like, oh, I'd like lots of people to buy it and I'd like it to make an impact, but actually it's not about that.
It's funny hearing you talk about like the idea of being comfortable with being ordinary. The other thing that brought up for me, and I think another driver of why I irrationally feel like I have to achieve and overachieve is that I think, well, no one will like me. Like I won't have any friends, and no one will want to talk to me if I'm in a room, for example. But I've been like thinking a lot about friendships in particular as my daughter is now going into high school and the night before her first day of high school, she says, "What was your year 7 like?" And I said, it was actually really awful because I was at a school that I really liked and my parents moved me to the big campus of that school because I was at the small campus and they thought they were making a really good decision for me because they said there'll be more opportunities at the bigger campus. And I really didn't want to go, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. And I went to this big campus and, there were 3-4 times as many kids in my year level. And I had the worst year. I made no friends, and the only kind of 2 groups I was in were triads, and I was the odd one out in those 2 groups of 3, and it was really, really awful. And then I begged my parents to just go back to the small campus, which they happily let me do, and I was telling my daughter that story and I said, but like I was a really different kid to you. Like I was really, really shy. And, like when I think about Frankie, I always try to help her see how she's changed. And, and she's been on this planet for 12 years. But like, she's become so much more confident. She's become so much more resilient. She's, I was really shy as a kid and just, probably quite socially anxious, whereas Frankie makes friends really easily, and I just feel this irrationally high level of joy when I see her with her friends, and she's got this amazing little group of friends, and that just brings me so much joy because I'm like, oh, she's safe, and I wasn't. And I think in my mind, I thought because I was such like, aside from my grades, I was a really ordinary, dorky, shy kid. And I just thought, I'm obviously not worthy of having friends because I'm such an ordinary person, even though my grades are really good. And I reckon that's probably driven me a lot as well. And what I've come to realize as an adult, and I feel like it's taken me decades to realize this, is that my friends don't value me for my achievements. They value me for my qualities as a human and the kind of friend that I am. And as basic as that sounds, it's taken me so long to actually realize that.
That makes so much sense. Like in those fundamental years, of course, we create these stories about what it is. We attach something to it, and then that's what we believe to be true. And I mean, I think that is most of adulthood, is kind of undoing those stories and beliefs that we latched onto to create a story of who we were. It's so interesting. Like my equivalent of that is not being smart enough. And, I was really emotionally intelligent as a kid, but academics, it was fine. Like I was if I had got an A, I would have been stoked, let me say it. was a pretty C, maybe a B student. Like, it was nothing special to write. I kind of cruised by. And that's always been a thing. I didn't go to university. I don't have a degree. Like, I've just kind of jumped into life and I learn best by doing. And yet that's always been a little narrative in the back of my mind of you're not smart enough. And so that's what came up for me writing the book. It's like all those things are there till I realized it's just different. It's just different. You're never going to be a great academic. I know that about myself. As soon as we have to like study stuff that's academic, it's almost, I just be like, blah, blah, blah. I just like can't, or like I was even reading this amazing textbook around systemic, organisational systemic stuff the other day. And it's a pretty thick, heavy textbook and it's a lot of theory. And I'm like, just tell me a story about how this looks in real life. And then it'll make sense to me, right? And I was so frustrated. I was like, my brain doesn't work that way. But it is coming to those points where you realize, gosh, that's what we attach it to. And that's probably not even real, but it's just what we did at the time to stay safe, to keep us where we are. I mean, we all have that, don't we? We all have versions of that within us. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about AI because I have to say, I don't subscribe to many people's newsletters, but I subscribe to yours and I always read them because they're really good and they clearly are not written by AI, right? They're not, and they're always I really highly recommend getting onto Amantha's newsletter because you really have always amazing information in there. And AI is here in our world. It's very polarizing at the moment. A lot of people have got a lot of feelings about it in many different ways, which are very valid. Anything new that comes along, and people are like, I would love to hear, one of your programs is about helping people to become more AI fluent, which I think is an amazing thing. Like, what are you seeing out there that, like, you're really embracing this AI piece right now? Like, what are you seeing is the magic of it?
Oh man, where do I start? I mean, like I've been using it, look, every day, multiple times a day. I guess since I was playing around with it in late 2022 when it kind of, came into the mainstream. But yeah, since the beginning of 2023. So I guess that's, 3.5 years. And I can't imagine doing my work without it. It's become like so fundamental to just the different things that I do as part of my job. Like if we take the newsletter, for example, I can share with you, if you like, just my workflow for writing that newsletter and how I think about AI with that. So for me, because I think the value that I bring, and I think the reason why someone would subscribe to my newsletter or, listen to how I work or how AI is for my thinking. Like they're not paying for an AI's thinking. And so for me, that really, really matters, that whatever idea is central to the newsletter or whatever tips I'm thinking about, it's stuff that's going on in my brain. And so I will start with some kind of an idea, or I'll kind of tap into what am I thinking about this week? What have I found really useful lately? And then what I will do, and I think that this is a really helpful way to use AI. A lot of people use AI, whether that's ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or Gemini, they're sort of the main ones, is that they will type, and a lot of people, because we've been trained to speak to Google like caveman speak, like best restaurants, Melbourne. That's kind of how a lot of people speak to AI, because that's how we're trained to speak to technology. But for me, I see it as, it's obviously not a human, but the way I talk to it is like I'm talking to you. It's a conversation. And for that reason, I think it can be really helpful. And I see some people do this just organically, is to have a name for your AI. Like if you're a ChatGPT user, like mine's called Sunny. I asked it to name itself. That is the name that it chose. And it just changes how I converse with it. And how I like to work with it when I'm shaping an idea and coming back to the newsletter is that I like to talk to it. And I also like to be quite efficient with my time. So at the moment, the gym that I go to, it's about a 14 minute drive from my home after having like a home gym situation for most of the last few years, thanks to COVID. So it's quite novel to be just spending a bit of time, in the car, going to the gym. I could listen to a podcast, and sometimes I do, but often I'll choose to chat with my AI. and I will put it on advanced voice mode. So that's what's called in ChatGPT. Got it on my phone. And yeah, this is a little icon that you press so it can talk back to you. And I find it, when I'm chatting about an idea, I find it a much more natural way to talk. And so what I'll do, I've got, a particular GPT that's trained in my newsletters. It knows the kind of format that I typically use. It knows, the back catalogue of newsletters, that I've written. And I'll talk to it about what I'm thinking, and I'll get it to ask me questions to help flesh out my thinking. So it's kind of like a thought partner, but what is really important is that I don't want it putting thoughts in my brain. I want it to extract what's in my brain. Then I will, and I'm doing all that just while I'm driving. So I'm kind of, because I think for a lot of us that do drive or have a commute, it can kind of feel like dead time, and a little bit frustrating. I personally hate being in the car and commuting to different places. And so that is how I will shape up like what is going to be the central idea, or tips or hacks or whatever I'm writing about. Then I will, because I've done so much writing, it's quite easy to get it, once we've shaped out the idea and shaped out the structure together, to get an okay first draft that sounds like me, and that I've got the words there. And then as a human, I go in and edit that quite a lot. Because I also feel like right at the beginning, it's human driven, and also at the end, it needs to be human driven. And then it's kind of quite collaborative in that middle process. And so I would never, for example, just go, great, like, now that we've talked about this, we've fleshed out a structure, we've got the key points, go write that for me, and then I click publish. Absolutely not. I'm getting a draft of the work that we've done so that I've got like something, so I don't have a blank page essentially, and then I'm kind of shaping that and molding that. It's kind of like, if I was doing pottery, it's like I've got like a really wonky kind of cup, and then I'm just like smoothing that out and shaping that into the shape that I want, and then out it goes into the world. So that's just like one example of, how I think about AI.
I love how you talk about that you want it to extract the ideas in your brain, because I think I've used it in the past where I'm like, here's this topic, this theory, what else could I know about it? And it kind of gives me, and I go, oh, that's an idea. And, but there's a real difference between how do I take what I'm thinking and what is there to give, and I love that idea of the collaboration piece. So, I think the thing with AI from a business point of view, like it's been a game changer for my business, just in many different things that I use. Like it's really made my life a lot more efficient. It's helped me kind of construct things in certain ways. Like I do really value that what it's brought. Yet it brings up a lot of fear for a lot of people, which makes sense. Like what are you feeling of the dangers that exist within it?
There's a lot, and I'm I won't even begin to like talk about the sort of the existential challenges, because it will just get really depressing really fast. Yeah. But like if we think about just day to day, I've just come from having a coffee with someone whose son is a university graduate, and I've heard this from a few people that are graduating from university and they're looking for grad jobs. And, I think that is now a really hard market, because that sort of that lower level of knowledge workers, a lot of that work can now be done by AI. And so therefore there are less positions, yet there's lots and lots of grads. And that's like a really hard market, I think, for knowledge workers in general. Like, and what I mean by knowledge worker is if you're in a job where value you bring to that job is your brain and how you think through things, quite a lot of that can be done by AI. But the thing I think is absolutely critical for people that are in that kind of work is to go, like, don't just go, okay, well, AI is terrible because it's taking all the jobs. The people that will have jobs are those that know how to work with the AI and collaborate with the AI. And it's not just about productivity and time savings, although, yes, that is massive. It's thinking, how can you use AI as your thought partner to augment what you're doing? Because I think that's where a lot of the magic lies. And, I think about how my processes for writing books has changed. Like my first 3 books were pre-AI. The Health Habit was early AI. I was working on that like in the first half of 2023. And then The Energy Game which I wrote for most of 2025, was like full AI in terms of not that AI wrote the book, but we worked really collaboratively. I went on so many walks with my AI buddy, like tossing around concepts, having it interview me to extract ideas, because I think, the book is I'd like to think it's sort of quite unique in how it solves the energy problem and the burnout problem for people, in that it is about really small challenges and experiments that you can run every day that are all science-backed, and it turns it into a game, and it makes it really fun and really achievable, rather than you have to make this big change or you have to like meditate for an hour every day. And when you're exhausted, any kind of a change like that feels completely undoable and unrealistic. But I think that the book is better because of how I, prompted and worked with my AI to extract better thinking from me. It also made the research process a lot more time efficient, which is also really great, in terms of the tools that I use. So yeah, it's really, really changed things for me because I know how to use it as my partner.
Yeah, beautiful. I was reading this this great thing actually on Instagram, and she was talking about her predictions around AI, and it felt really, really poignant. And she was saying things like the older generation needs to learn how to use AI efficiently, and the younger generation really needs to go and do those jobs like hospitality, service industry stuff, where they learn how to interact with people. And she said, because really the one thing AI can't do is be human. And perhaps this next generation that's coming through that is grown up with AI or is using it in those ways, and we see this with technology and kids on phones all the time, they are missing those fundamental skills of knowing how to talk to each other, read someone's body cues, the empathy, compassion, all the things that we know are really important about being human, which AI is never going to be able to do. And, I think it's a really interesting place that we're sitting in. And I think about this like when the internet first started, right? We were around when the internet first started. And how I remember being excited about, like, I don't have to write a letter. Like, I could type a letter to someone and they're going to get remember the first email I sent. I remember it because I remember thinking, do you write underscore or is it like a thing? Like, I think I might have written underscore, right? I still remember where I was. I mean, this was a long time ago. And yet people get scared about it. What's it going to mean? All that kind of stuff. And, there is no doubt where we are at this point on the planet in this time of history. We are moving fast. Even if we circle back to the conversation at the beginning, where we're overstimulated, there is so much information going on. The swing is back to the quiet and the pause and the human, and it's the balance that we're trying to strike within it. And, and what I'm hearing in you is that we have to learn how to use it to assist our life in a way that is almost going to allow us to have more human connection. And that's how I kind of dance with it. I look at it and go, yeah, I love that it streamlines things in my world that would usually take me ages. That doesn't. So I can go for a walk, or I can hang out with my kids, or I can do something that's being of service. And I look at it in how to balance those ways. But I think for me, and this was one of the reasons behind this podcast as well, is we are humans being in this world. And one of the most fundamental things we need to do is come back to that. And even from an education point of view, I created a school years ago, and we don't have tech at our school. Kids don't learn on tech. I mean, we have some stuff that they can research in their older years, but there's no learning on iPads technology. Like, we are pens, paper, we are outside, we are building with sticks. And it's interesting from an education point of view, a lot of the research that talks about what helps children learn best is play. We know it's about nature. We know it's getting dirty. It's like we've gone back 30 or 40 years to what we used to do is now seen as really innovative education, which is very interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, kids getting dirty, playing outside, teamwork, collaboration, all those kind of things, which are core skills that we need as humans to learn how to get along, to learn how to be in relationship. And I do wonder if we're going to swing all the way back again to that, because we do blow out and then we come back, learning online, and which has its place. But, I do I do get concerned when I see little 5 and 6-year-olds learning on iPads all the time. And I get it in our system that's really stretched. Education, I mean, that's a whole other podcast, but I get it. I understand it. But I also go, we've known for a long, long time as humans how we develop and grow. We know this developmental stuff that needs to happen. We know what happens when babies learn to crawl first and why they have to crawl, and then they learn to walk, and then they are using their hands in different ways. And we know even as young kids, they have to jump and swing and play and fall over and all those things that helps create this beautiful development in their brains and their bodies and all those things. And my concern is, we are eradicating so much of that because of technology. We see that in parenting, we see that in attachment, all that kind of stuff. And it's coming back to those fundamentals of being human. And I just feel like that voice has to be as loud as the benefits and the beauty of what AI can bring.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more about the human skills. I also worry about thinking skills. I remember one of my teammates was running a workshop for some graduates as part of the graduate program for one of our clients, and there was a particular challenge that they were asked to do, and they all just got out their phones and asked ChatGPT, and it's like, you're missing the point. And I worry that if you haven't had to do the hard work of thinking your way through the problems that you encounter at work and in life, and that you're just outsourcing all that thinking to AI, then firstly, how are you even going to learn to think? And importantly, how are you going to learn to have good judgment and make good decisions? And they're things that I really, really worry about for younger people.
Yeah, it's one of the things we say at our school, where we're not teaching children what to think, we're teaching them how to think. And that, you're so right, that critical thinking. And I am seeing a bit of this, as AI really came in, and you get these, like, I reckon about a year ago, my husband kept sending these memes to everyone in the family of these dogs dressed up dancing, and the kids, I mean, he thinks they're hilarious. And my kids would be like, Dad. And for a while there, I was like, oh, how are they getting the dogs to until you're like, no, that's not real. For a while there, I was like, God, that's a really well-trained dog. So, I mean, that is where some people still are, right? Because they're seeing stuff and they're going, oh, wow, that's really amazing. And on some level, I also think about this next generation. They're coming in being a little bit more discerning, because they're like, that's not real, that's not real, that's not real. And there's and I'm hearing this, there's a bit more of a drive to be in person with people. I need to see you, I need to feel you. I'm really not believing until I'm actually seeing it with my own eyes. And that's not a bad thing either. I think we see the swing, after COVID, where we were all kind of separated, coming back to being together, feeling each other out. And I do think that on some level, yes, that critical thinking is so vital, but for those young people. But I also think there's a part of them that smells bullshit, and that they're critical of what's real and what's not. And yet, I think my generation and 50 and plus, we're like, oh, how beautiful that is, that video. And then you go, oh, that's totally and it's really incredible what can be done that you don't even actually realize. And that's probably the scary thing, isn't it?
I think it's really scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to need to be aware of. And you're so right, like the dangers of what we've heard, and, that's going to be there. And as humans, we're going to adapt again. And for me, just keep coming back to that place of staying connected to who we are and to each other is always going to be the foundation that we actually have to build from. Yeah. Yeah. All right. To finish off, I just want to touch back on your beautiful book again. What do you want people to know about this book?
Look, what I want people to know is, if they are listening to this, it's going, I'm so tired, I'm maybe burnt out, I feel like I am going to bed at night, but I'm certainly not waking up feeling refreshed, and I just feel drained by everything right now, then there are really small things that you can do to start to get better and start to recover. And so that's what the energy game is all about. I put it out there really to help people like me. I wish I had this book in 2024. And I hope that I've just made it really simple and doable to go, where is the path back from burnout or chronic depletion?
Yeah, I love that. I remember, and I think maybe just particularly in the mothering years, that especially when I had younger kids, depletion was like my standard. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, you should wake up and feel vital." And I go, I don't think I've ever felt vital. Maybe when I was like 17 and I had no cares in the world. But like as a parent, I was like, that is not one word I would ever have used in my of like how I feel. Do you feel vital? Do you feel radiant? What? I was always just trying to chase more time away or sleep or all those kind of things. Yeah, I can see now older and I don't have those responsibilities of raising kids and I get to choose kind of my hours and work I do. I just see that actually that's how we're meant to be. We are meant to feel vital. We're meant to protect this beautiful container of our own spaces and lives so that we can live like that, because we're not actually meant to live in that burnout, as you say, it's struggle. It doesn't actually serve anyone. And I also think too, as we touched on too, the patterns, the imprints, the conditioning we have around self-care, rest, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that plays a massive role too in our ability or our willingness to give that to ourselves as well. I think that was probably for me the biggest hurdle I had to overcome, which was I am worthy of rest. I can sit down. It is okay if that doesn't happen right now, because that wasn't the narrative in my head. So that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, if you don't have energy, how can you be the best person of yourself and the best person to those that you love? You can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone gets this book and reads, because I'm pretty sure that most of the people that listen to this podcast are all mothers and they're all young women and they all probably really need this. So I hope that they all get out. So what day does it launch?
July 7, it is out into the world.
That's my daughter's birthday. Great day. Yeah. Beautiful. Go check out The Energy Game by Amantha Imber. Is there anything else that you want people to know about what you've got going on? Any other programs and stuff you've got?
Oh, look, if you're interested in AI, just visit inventium.ai and there's lots of info there. And, if you want to sign up to the newsletter, I'm sure we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I always find you just the most amazing wealth of knowledge. I've so enjoyed the times we've caught up and talked. I so value just the place that you stand in the world. And if I had known you in year 7, we would have been friends. True. I would have been like, I get you. I hear that. So thank you for taking the time to come and be here and share your knowledge. And, I just think the work you do in the world is really important. And I just am holding a brilliant, amazing success for this book and all that's to come next.
Oh, thank you so much. And I feel very similarly about you. My life is definitely better with you in it. So thank you.
Thank you, darling. Thank you. I feel like I could sit with Amantha and talk for days. She has a lot of amazing insights about just who we are as humans and the habits that we have and how that, often those unconscious stories and threads that we carry can keep us stuck, keep us small. I was really touched just by even her own personal sharings around what's driven her, that need to succeed, how we all can have those little voices within us that push us forward. And sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not healthy. And I really valued just the honesty and the candidness of what she was talking about. I also, I think those beautiful boosts that she talks about when she's referring to her new book, Energy Game, which I really highly recommend going and checking out. I think they are sometimes the beautiful little tips that we need to actually just move the needle a little bit. We all say, I want to change, I want it to be different, but those grand gestures don't often last. So I think those beautiful boosts and little tips can be so helpful when we're wanting to shift and change some of the things that are going on in our world. And I really valued our conversation around AI because I think we know that AI is here to stay. And I think the challenge is really how do we utilize it in our world to make our lives easier? But how do we also stay deeply connected to the humanness within all of us? I really valued the part where we were talking about, these skills that we need to learn about relationships, about critical thinking, about how to think are so vital in this world. And I think these are the conversations we need to keep on having. So I invite you to go check out Amantha's new book, or her other books as well. She's a wealth of knowledge, and check out her new podcast. She's got some really amazing things to say.
Thanks for sharing this time with me. You can find my book, Own Your Story, at bookshops or listen to the audiobook on Audible. I even read it myself. You can stay connected with Humans Being on Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, question or contemplation. And visit my website laelstone.com.au, where you'll find heaps of great resources and courses for you to explore. This podcast is produced by Nigel Carboon, recorded by the crew at We Make Online Videos, and our original music is created by Josh Reed. Humans Being is produced on the lands of the Bunurong and Wadawurrung people. We pay respect to their unique and diverse cultures and to elders past, present and future. Until next time, stay connected and don't forget to be human.